You have to have a small number of big, easy-to-understand ideas, Senator Chris Murphy, D-Conn, recently told NewsPulse News. Trump had those. Bernie Sanders had those. But it didn't seem to me that the Clinton campaign did. I don't know that anybody in Connecticut could have listed a specific economic proposal from the Clinton campaign. They had great ideas. The ideas just didn't light anybody's fire. Whether the emerging Democratic platform lights anybody's fire remains to be seen. It's far to the left of anything the party has proposed since the 1970s, and sounds more like the to-do list of a Scandinavian parliament than Bill Clinton's triangulated politics or even Obama's careful, consensus-seeking progressivism. But in the age of Trump, Democrats aren't just looking for the man or woman who can depose the disruptor-in-chief. They're also looking for a message that can break through and connect with voters who defected or stayed home in 2016. Here are some early, eye-popping ideas that could define that message in 2020. Democrats have aspired to establish a universal health care system for much of the last 100 years. In 2008, the debate between Obama and Hillary Clinton was about how to expand private insurance to as many Americans as possible. In 2016, Sanders introduced single-payer into the presidential conversation, even as Clinton continued to campaign on improving Obamacare's private insurance exchanges. That isn't to say Democrats now agree completely with the Vermont senator. Sanders still wants to phase out private insurance entirely and replace it with a single government-run plan that provides coverage to all Americans, Medicare for all, as he calls it. And he may still run in 2020. But forcing everyone to give up their current coverage would create very real challenges, both practical and political. That's why much of the rest of the potential Democratic field seems to be coalescing around a less disruptive alternative to Sanders's vision, what you might call Medicare access for all. Murphy and Merkley are both considered possible 2020 contenders, as are several of their co-sponsors, California Senator Kamala Harris, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. So don't be surprised if this modified single-payer proposal becomes a big part of the 2020 campaign. In 2016, Clinton lost for two reasons: working-class minorities didn't turn out for her the way they'd turned out for Obama, and Trump peeled off just enough of the working-class white vote in just the right places: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, to eke out an electoral college victory. And now some Dems think they've found it, offering every American a government job at a living wage. The shift has been sharp enough to induce whiplash. In 2016, neither Sanders nor Clinton mentioned a federal job guarantee. In fact, you'd have to go back to the 1970s, and before that the New Deal, to find a time Democrats were even discussing the idea, let alone attempting to implement it. Yet for the 2020 crowd, the upsides might be too tempting to resist. In policy terms, a jobs guarantee could effectively eliminate recessions, and many economists believe it could boost wages as well, a top progressive priority at a time of rampant income inequality. Expect to hear a lot more about guaranteed government jobs between now and 2020. Senators Harris, Gillibrand, Merkley, and Elizabeth Warren all co-sponsored Booker's bill. Barack Obama once called economic inequality the defining challenge of our time, and most of his would-be Democratic successors seem to agree. I do my very best to fight for working people in this job, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown told NewsPulse News last October. And that means all workers, whether you punch a timesheet or swipe a badge, make a salary or earn tips. Whether you're on payroll, a contract worker, or a temp working behind a desk, on a factory floor, or behind a restaurant counter. The fact is, all workers across this country are feeling squeezed. Companies that pay a living wage and provide health benefits and retirement benefits and don't outsource their jobs, they should get a lower tax rate, Brown recently explained. But the companies that pay $10 or $11 an hour, so that their employees get food stamps and Medicaid and Section 8 housing vouchers? Those companies should pay a corporate freeloader fee, because taxpayers have to subsidize those corporations' wages. The chances of Brown's corporate freeloader fee actually becoming law? Nil, under the current regime, and not much higher even if the Democrats take over. Both parties are loath to offend the business community. The idea of free public college tuition was one of the flashpoints of the 2016 Democratic nominating contest. Sanders backed it, Clinton did not. Eventually, though, Clinton adopted something like Sanders's position, promising to cover public college tuition for families making up to $125,000 as a way of reaching out to his voters after winning the primary. Now the rest of the party seems to heading in the same direction. In fact, Democrats might go even further in 2020, if the latest legislation from Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz is any indication. That's because we ought to cover the full cost of college for people who can't afford it before we cover tuition for people who can, Schatz recently explained. Schatz's needle-threading proposal solves a tricky political problem and could become the Democratic Party's default college affordability plan as a result. A 2016 Gallup poll, for example, found that less than half of Americans, or just 47%, supported the idea of tuition-free college, and that it was especially unpopular among the white working-class voters who flocked to Donald Trump and whom Democrats are now working hard to court. The reason? Because blue-collar voters assumed that only elites would benefit from the policy. Schatz's proposal counters that perception, denying freebies for upper-income students, unlike Sanders, while promising more support for their lower-income counterparts than Clinton. Senators Gillibrand, Booker, Harris, Merkley, Warren, and Brown have all signed on as co-sponsors. Imagine if your local post office wasn't just a post office, but a bank as well. That's the vision behind New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's new Postal Banking Act, which would transform America's vast network of U.S. Postal Service facilities into places where low-income Americans with inadequate access to commercial banking could open accounts, cash checks, deposit money, and obtain low-cost, short-term loans. Both Sanders and Warren have touted the idea in the past, but Gillibrand is the first senator to introduce legislation. The goal would be to steer the 34 million unbanked and underbanked American households away from the for-profit payday lending system, in which workers, many of whom are Black or Hispanic, routinely shoulder triple-digit fees to borrow money for bills that come due before their next paycheck because they don't live near a traditional commercial bank or can't afford to maintain an account at one. They often descend into permanent debt as a result. With 30,000 locations nationwide, including nearly 18,000 in so-called banking deserts, the Postal Service could provide an alternative that makes it a little less expensive to be poor in America. Not every new Democratic idea is as big and bold as, say, a federal job guarantee. But nearly all of them are bigger and bolder and more liberal than what the party was proposing just a few years ago. For instance, along with Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, Ohio's Sherrod Brown has floated by far the most ambitious child allowance plan in recent memory: $3,000 per year in tax credits for each child ages 6 to 18, and $3,600 per year for each child ages 0 to 5, with no strings attached. Currently, the U.S. is one of the only developed countries in the world without such an allowance. If implemented, Brown and Bennett's plan would lift 5.3 million children out of poverty, slashing the overall child poverty level by 45%. Even the typically staid issue of campaign finance reform has come in for a shakeup, with Representative R.O. Khanna of California, whose district includes Silicon Valley, introducing a plan that would give every American citizen $50 virtual democracy dollars to donate to the presidential, Senate and House candidates of their choosing, a plan that would, if every 2016 voter participated, generate $7 billion in campaign contributions, outpacing the $6.8 billion donated that year by private interests. Most of these ideas would, of course, carry a hefty price tag, so it isn't hard to imagine the 2020 GOP attack ads: how will Democrats pay for all of their big government promises? But even there, Dems seem to be learning a lesson from Trump and his Republican allies, who last year passed a corporate tax cut that will add an estimated $1 trillion to the deficit by 2019.